Welcome to the DNX podcast, the number one resource for entrepreneurs, nomads, and impact-driven souls. And I am your coach, Silvia Christman. Welcome back. Today we're here with Alexander Hartmann, and we actually met at the DNX conference in Berlin earlier this year, where you're giving a fantastic presentation, and I was very excited about it. So we're happy that you made the time for us that we could interview you for the English podcast as well. So welcome.
Really happy to be here.
Yeah, so I was fascinated by your presentation because I had never heard about you before, and it was the first time that I saw it, that you had a reality hacker TV show. Is that correct? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this, where you trained over 6,000 hypnotists and hypnotherapists?
Exactly. Well, it's been two different things. The one is the television show. I've been recording Alexander Hartmann, the reality hacker, with A&E, and it aired in like 14 countries, which was pretty cool. And on that show, we just tested the borders of reality. So how do people perceive the world around them, and how can we actually change that? And we went through pretty amazing experiments where we threw people out of airplanes and had them forget that they ever jumped out of an airplane, preferably with a parachute. But they forgot their first parachute jump. We had people in ice baths that didn't get cold. We put needles through people's hands to check if they felt the pain if I told them not to. So we really tried to stretch the borders of reality. A classic hypnotic phenomenon is that somebody forgets their name, for example. We took it a step further and had them forget everything they ever knew, who they were, where they were born, etc. So those were some really crazy examples of how far that notion of reality can go if we realize it's not a stable concept, but more, really stretchable, actually. That was a television show, and of course it was meant to be it wasn't meant to be too serious, right? It was meant to be like big blockbuster experiences for those people, but it's not what I usually do. In real life, I train hypnotherapists. So I trained over 6,000 hypnotherapists who work in practices with people to help them make a change in their lives. And of course, people ask, well, how do you get the two together? Isn't show hypnosis one thing and hypnotherapy the other? And the truth is, kind of. Well, I am against show hypnosis. And that sounds weird if I got a show on television where I do hypnosis.
Right.
But the important part is I would never get on a stage with 5 to 10 people sitting in a line and have them do embarrassing stuff like, I don't know, humping a chair, clucking like a chicken, all the cliche stuff. But of course,
I've never seen that. Is that what's typically done? I've never seen.
Oh yeah, horrible stuff is done, like handshake, orgasm, and well, that can come in handy, but it shouldn't be on a stage. Now, the thing is, I actually do oppose any kind of show hypnosis that ridicules the audience, but at the same time, as a speaker and as I'm coming from stage, as my background is, in the thespian arts and stages, I, of course, do want people to experience, not just hear about something intellectually, but experience the power of their minds. So what I do on stages, for example, is lead somebody through an experience where they have, a great experience and have fun themselves when they forget their first name, for example. That's not exactly embarrassing. It's just weird and different from every day. When they can't bend their arm because it's stiff like an iron bar. That's not embarrassing. It's just something they don't usually do. And once they realize it's not something I'm doing to them, but actually something they're doing. So the force is not strong within me. The force is strong within them. And they learn how to use that power of their brain and how to use their mind. Something fascinating happens when people tap into that potential. So that's the two things I'm doing. No, wrong. That's one thing I did, which was a television special where we went a bit spectacular.
Yeah.
But in my day-to-day life, I give keynote addresses with companies and at big conventions where I talk about how to use that power within your brain to achieve your goals more easily, have a lot more fun in your life. And on the other side, I train hypnotherapists to become better coaches and therapists and do great change work in the lives of the people they work with.
So when somebody comes to seek a hypnotherapist, what are the top 3 reasons people come to you?
Smoking, weight loss, fears and phobias.
I would have guessed smoking because that was definitely my consideration. Many years ago when I wanted to quit smoking, I couldn't figure out how. I considered it hypnotherapy, but then I ended up quitting anyway. So I never had to do it. But that was my number one guess. What do you think it is about smoking?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's those 3 areas where we can where we can really help a lot. So there are a lot of people with fears and phobias running around that really don't live the potential they could because they're scared to step up to their potential, scared of what will other people think. Some are scared to travel because they can't sit on an airplane. So if you can help somebody lose that fear or phobia in like one session, that's a good thing. Weight loss and smoking are 2 of the basic habit changes that today's society is struggling with. So that's one of the most common places where a hypnotherapist can help if he's doing a good job.
Yeah. Is there any case that you remember that really impacted you the most?
Perhaps my first therapeutic hypnosis. It's been more than 10 years. I was in Hartlepool in England, and Hartlepool is like one of the topmost cities in England. If you're like right next to Scotland, and it's ugly. It's like in Germany we got Essen and Düsseldorf and those areas where you get like lots of heavy industry, coal mines, etc. So Hartlepool is kind of like that. If you grow up there, you want to get out. If you manage to, you do. And my brother, as I refer to him, because actually he's the ex-husband of my half-sister. So basically a brother-in-law-ish. But I got to know the 2 at the same time, and he was like a brother to me from the first day. So my brother, his family came from Hartlepool, and so I was there to meet them. And a week before that, I had my original hypnotherapy training in Derby, also in England. And I met those girls who lived, 3 of them, in one house, living community. And all 3 were smokers, heavy smokers, and one of them wanted to become pregnant. And they asked if I could help with the smoking part. And because, of course, she couldn't or shouldn't until she managed to stop, and she didn't. And that was the day I still had like no experience and no real clue, but I was brave and I went like, yeah, sure, I can. And so I went with it. And all 3 stopped smoking that day. One of them called me a couple months later going, Alex, it's a pain in the ass. I can't physically smoke no more. And that was actually quite a nice bit of feedback. But 9 months later, I got another piece of feedback that actually now they are 4 in that house. And that, the one who wanted to have a child actually did, and she stopped smoking for good. And that was my first sessions. And I don't want to say I brought life into this world because I didn't. That was someone else. But the experience of having a role in somebody's life that really made a huge impact so early in my career probably had the biggest impact on me, realizing that I want to continue down that road of helping people make changes in their lives as a coach, and using that tool set that I developed later on of how to talk with the subconscious mind rather than the conscious mind.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm so fascinated by your work. You also wrote a book called Mit dem Elefant durch die Wand. What does that mean in English? you translate.
Well, roughly translated probably means taking your elephant through the wall. It will probably, if I ever publish it in English, which I hope it'll probably be called The Elephant in the Room.
Right.
But the main meaning is this. I mean, in German, it only has that name for one reason: it rhymes. And the subtext is the inner elephant is my picture, my metaphor for the subconscious mind. Right? We all got conscious thinking and subconscious, unconscious thinking, and the elephant is that big inner animal that we all know. We all know those situations where you want to go one way and you end up the opposite direction. You want to make a change in your diet or in your workout regimen, and you end up doing exactly the same, or at least not doing what you planned to do, because what you know and what you actually do are usually two different sports.
Yeah.
And now I know who's responsible. Good news, it's not you, it's your elephant.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the subconscious mind, that strong force within you. I call it the elephant because it learns, it never forgets. And it takes all that information and all that stuff that it learned, like mindsets, beliefs, with it, and travels with you through your life, having a huge impact. And on top of the elephant, there is like the elephant rider. That's the conscious thinking, the rational thinking. And that can tell you, well, let's go left, let's go right. Oh, I want to go there. But if the rider wants to go left and the elephant wants to go right, you're going right. And so it's really important, not just in hypnotherapy. We can actually ditch that topic, because for most people it's interesting, but not what they're into. But what we can take from that into our daily lives, on how we communicate, how we lead relationships, how we achieve our goals, there are huge learnings from how the subconscious mind works, because for most people, that's what stands in the way between them and the slightly better life that they wish to live.
Yeah, totally.
If they don't communicate with their elephant, if they just want to do it through the rational thinking, which will not get them there usually.
Yeah, I call it conversations with my inner sloth, or conversations with, or the troll, I always what I say is like, keep your goals away from the trolls, because your inner troll is going to just come and, micromanage those goals.
I like the picture. Actually, in my metaphor, I kind of put it the other way around. I say, if you have a goal, make sure your elephant knows and agrees. That's why I don't like the German, like innere Schweinehund, like the inner sloth, the inner really lazy part of you.
Well, sloth is cute. A Schweinehund is something different.
It's beautiful. But if you think of it as a troll, as the enemy, you try to do something against it. And at least in my worldview, I think the most practical way to go about your subconscious mind is to realize how it works, and then working with it to achieve your goal. Because it can be both. It can be the hindrance. It can be the brakes that are put on and you can't put your traction on the tracks. But at the same time, it can be that 4-ton elephant that rides in the right direction with you on its back, carrying you like a wave of enthusiasm, motivation, and good ideas towards your goals. And so if you find a way to communicate with your elephant, and I'm very open to talk about that today, then it becomes easy to live the life that you actually want, instead of standing in your own way.
Interesting. So I always wonder about hypnotherapy as sort of a shortcut, right? I like, because I know that personal development can mean a lot of work, and sometimes you have to actually put in the work and also the understanding of being in touch with your elephant. And as somebody who loves shortcuts, I fantasized about this idea that hypnotherapy can give me a shortcut, that instead of putting in the work of consistently checking in with my limiting beliefs and, making sure I'm awake to where my limited mindset is overriding the reality and with it the possibilities that I'm trying to create. Can we just use hypnotherapy and just call it a day and be done with it and just be amazing? Does that work?
Well, let's put it that way. I think it's a marvelous tool to make very quick changes in certain areas of your life, actually in most areas. Yeah. However, certain things, of course, take time and development.
Bummer.
I don't like long-form therapy. Like, no matter what the topic is, most people come into a session, they got one session and they have a change in their lives. Otherwise, I'm doing something wrong. But I think some things don't need to be dealt with through therapy, right? Some things are just life, and that needs experience, of course, and that needs a road to be traveled, not just to be seen on the map. But if you got like a concrete thing you want to change in your life, like stop smoking, like lose weight and actually do it this time, well, I can't hypnotize somebody and they're going to be 20 pounds lighter. Otherwise, I'd just be doing that and have become a billionaire by doing it by now. But of course, what I can do is that if they have a workout regimen they want to stick to, if they have a way of eating they want to stick to, and they're always having a hard time doing it, then a good session can help them find the inner resources and the pictures that are so strong that they motivate them to actually do it, that in the right moments they remember and they have the right feelings through the right thinking, so they can do the right doing, right? So it's always, what do you think? What do you feel? What are your actions? And one leads to the next. And of course, we start with the thinking part, and we do it very much on purpose, so that your elephant thinks in pictures, right? So that's the first clue. Like, let's get out of the hypnotherapy thing, I think, and let's have a look at how does this apply to everyday life. And if we know that what we think always has an effect on our emotions, beautiful pictures of the future motivate us, give us good feelings. Horrible pictures of that same future do quite something different. Beautiful news create a feeling in your body. Terrible news create a feeling in your body. So there's this connection between thinking and physical response. And that physical response, whether we are motivated and want to go for it, or whether we are scared and procrastinate and go like, yeah, well, I might do this next year, that has a huge impact on how we're going to actually act. Results and success always comes from action. But the action comes from our inner resources. And so if we enter the loop at that point of how we use our thoughts, our inner images of the future, of the past, and of how we're talking to ourselves in every moment, that's the way we can change our output, because it changes how we feel and act. And that way we change our results.
Interesting. Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about how do you change that internal dialogue, which often is self-deprecating, and many people have a habit of engaging in a lot of negative self-talk habitually without even noticing it.
I think that, by the way, is one of those things that actually are a process, and it probably will take some time to get into the habit of talking kindly to yourself. But as any habit, you can start with small steps. And I think one of the ways, one tool, so to speak, to use for your own brain is to think of yourself as your best friend. Because at the end of the day, yourself, and that's one of the metaphors my partner in crime and loved one, Vanessa Buchner, my girlfriend, is actually using in her seminars about self-love. And she says, if you are your best friend, and you should be, because you spent your whole life with yourself, would you be talking to a best friend the way you're actually talking to yourself right now? Would you, like, a good friend of yours is in a troubling situation, and he comes to you and asks for you consulting them, helping them, perhaps consoling them, but talking to them, and you go like, yeah, I understand, yeah, but I think that problem will always be with you because you're a piece of shit, because you'll never amount to anything, because you're just not worth it. That's not how you would talk to a good friend, and usually they wouldn't be one afterwards anyways.
Probably.
But that's the way we talk to ourselves all the time. A lot of people do. And so just having this reminder of, would I talk to a good friend like that? Would I talk to my grandmother like that? Sometimes talking to yourself like you would to your grandmother is also a good tool. Another thing is, like Tony Robbins, for example, has a saying that the quality of questions you ask defines the quality in your life. And I think that is a major aspect of how this entire inner monologue dialogue thing works. Because if I ask myself, why does this always happen to me? Why am I such a prick? Why can't I do anything right? I will find answers to those questions. The question just is, will those answers help me?
Right.
And most probably they won't. If I ask myself more empowering questions, my brain will find answers to those questions. And those answers will be a lot more helpful. So the question basically is, what kind of questions do you ask yourself when you're talking to yourself?
So what kind of questions should I ask myself?
Well, 3 questions that are always helpful. Well, 3 questions that we always ask ourselves in any kind of situation are: A, what do I pay attention to? That's something our brain does automatically at any moment. From all the stuff that's around me, from all the stuff that's happening, from all the things that happen in my life, what do I pay attention to? To the bad stuff or to the good stuff? Do I pay attention to how somebody betrayed me, or to how actually that person also helped me a lot in my life? Do I pay attention to that one customer that really ruined my mood in that moment? And do I focus on that for the rest of the day? Or do I focus on all those other beautiful people that I met that actually made my day? And depending on where I lead my focus, where focus goes, energy flows, of course, my thinking will be, and thus my emotions. So question 1 is, what do I want to spend my focus on? Because I'll direct it to one thing at a time anyways. Then is this the right place, or is perhaps that over there the right thing to focus on? Second question is, when I decide where do I put my focus, then I have one very powerful chance, and that is to decide, what does it mean? What value do I attach to what I just experienced? Because the value of something is never in the experience intrinsically. It always comes from the value we give it. And when we really realize that, I once had a participant of my seminars actually tattoo that on his forearm. So every day he just looks at his arm asking those 3 questions. I'll give you the third one in a second. But the second one has the utmost power, because there's this story of I don't even know who told this story first. It wasn't me. I think it probably was yeah, exactly, that guy who I don't remember right now. It doesn't matter. It's a beautiful story of 2 brothers. One has been caught after robbing a liquor store, and he escaped from the police, stealing a car, racing through the entire city, finally getting caught. He was interviewed first by the police and later by a local journalist who asked, what happened? Why? And he said, well, it began early in my life that I got on a slippery slope, because my father was an alcoholic and my mom, she abused narcotics. And when I was 5 years old, my father left and I never saw him again. So, what else should have become of me? And funnily enough, he had a brother, and the brother was about the same age. He was a local high school teacher. He had a wife, a dog, a car, a small house in the suburbs, a very ordered life. And he was asked, well, what happened in your life? You're so different from your brother who just got caught by the police. And he said, well, it all started very early. Like my father was an alcoholic. My mom abused narcotics. When I was 4 years old, my dad left. I never saw him again. What else should have had become of me? And the funny thing is, both give the same answer. Both say, well, it started early. I had this terrible past. What else should I have done with my life? But for one, it's the clear, the way he gives meaning, the way he attributes meaning to things is that happened, therefore my life has to go to the gutter. And the other one was I experienced that, therefore I will never allow that to become my life. Right. So what meaning we take from things, that is our great opportunity. That is our great freedom, because we can't really decide on what cards we're dealt, to go a bit cliche here. But yeah, we do have the power of how we play that hand, how we react to the reality we're facing. So question number 1, what do I focus on from all the stuff that's here? Second, is it something empowering or something that destroys me? Second, how do I react to that? By giving meaning to it emotionally. And then third, how do I react on a physical level? What do I do about it? And if you just ask yourself those 3 questions, from the things that are happening, what do I focus on? The stuff that's working or the stuff that's not working? What does it mean? Is it punishment from God or a big chance to learn something from hardship? What do I do about it? Give up, cry about it, roll myself up? Or will I get into action because something is wrong here? And just those 3 questions, if you ask them consciously, because you do ask them anyways, that's how our brain is wired. All the time, our brain figures out what to focus on. All the time, our brain does give meaning to things, and all the time we do react. If we now do it on purpose, and something that helps actually is a trigger point. You don't have to tattoo it, even though I strongly recommend it. No, but you can just, for the first week, just write it on your left hand in like palm, on your inner hand, on the palm, with a Sharpie pen.
Okay.
Those 3 questions until you grind them in, right? Next day, you got to write them again because they'll be blurred.
Right.
Do write them again and do that for 1 week. And if that doesn't change your life, please never listen to my podcast again.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But,
delete. Actually, I'm just kidding. No, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this out because I've noticed there's, just to give you an example, I was curious about what you're going to say because there's a big disconnect in my own personal experience that I notice from time to time that in my waking hours, I'm a creative problem solver, right? So when I see something that's different, I immediately go into sort of like, cool, what can we do? What do I pay attention to? So for example, last night I had some cancellation about something that was really important to me. And I was like, whatever. But at the same time, it's like, cool, look at that. I have more time to give this awesome radio interview now in Malta. And I get to like go into the fort, and I'm like, awesome, perfect. That's like my go-to. I'm like, that goes, there's another thing that's way more cool that I'm really excited about. Right. I don't spend that much time on does it mean anything? It just is, right? Like one thing goes, something else happens in its place, and it's also cool, maybe even cooler. Who knows?
But that is a meaning you attribute.
Right, I guess, okay.
And that's a good, I think it's a very good way of dealing with how to give meaning.
Yeah.
If you give the meaning of this is horrible, that's perhaps not as helpful. Yeah. But hey, it just is a great way of attributing meaning, even though it's not one that has a strong feeling attached to it.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Yeah, because I'm always like, I don't want to go down to the meaning route. I'm just like things just are, and now I'm going to look at what else can be there. And I think my go-to reaction on a physical level is always, I'm the eternal opportunist, right? like, to the point that there's some degree of delusional thinking. I'm like, well, there has to be upward and onward. That's the logical conclusion to everything that doesn't work out, right? There has to be something better in its place.
And the funny thing is, people who have the default mode of going the opposite direction then would tell you that you're delusional and that it's wrong to just see the positive thing in things. But the question to me is never what is right or wrong, because the answer is usually both or none. The question is what is helpful? Yeah. What helps you achieve the kind of lifestyle, happiness, or whatever is important to you? And in that case, I think the reaction you just described is very much helpful.
It is helpful to me. Exactly. Because otherwise, if I didn't do that, I would fall prey to my own thinking, which I'm definitely have capacity for, and I just don't want to go there.
Yeah.
I just don't. It's uncomfortable. This sort of fear-based thinking of like, oh my God, worst case scenario is always going to happen. That's uncomfortable. So I just find it more helpful to think about all the cool things that could be happening in its place, that if I had planned on them, I would have cheated myself out of extraordinary experiences that are far greater than my own imagination.
Yeah.
How's that? Good?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, good. Do I get a pass?
I'll sign up for that, yeah.
Excellent. I like that. But what my question that was, I'm well aware of the fact that there is a degree of my thinking that if I were to give it room, it will walk the other way.
Yeah.
Is that normal? Do most people have that?
Oh, yeah, sure. The question is well, you don't want to suppress your thinking either. But if you go into action mode, then usually at least you don't go into pondering and thinking things into pieces. And you don't go spiraling down with your thoughts. But yeah, actually, of course, most well, let's put it that way. How did the brain evolve? Like through evolution, our brain learned to do two things: A, keep us alive, and B, keep us alive. So it was about two things: avoid pain and get the good stuff.
Yes.
Right?
That's me.
Exactly. And the cool thing is we are now in the era of we are allowed to focus on going for the good stuff. But our brain evolved through a period in life where survival was much more important than pleasure. So if those are the two capacities of our brain, avoid pain and gain pleasure, which of the two do you think the brain is more trained to do?
Avoid pain.
Exactly. And that's why people are more easily to focus on negative stuff. It's easier to focus on the negative because that's what our brain is kind of hardwired to do. Does it mean that we have to? Because our brain, no. We can train ourselves to focus more on the positive side. Why? Because in the past, if you were running through the savannah and there was a saber-toothed tiger and you didn't focus on it, you probably wouldn't have made it into the gene pool that now is the supply for us human beings. You wouldn't have passed on your genes very well. So those cavemen survived that were aware of the saber-toothed tiger and didn't exactly like him, and who ran away instead of just looking for the beautiful flowers. But nowadays we are saber-toothed tigers are a very scarce commodity. So it's very rare to find one. But we're still so focused on avoiding pain that we actually bring ourselves into a lot of drama and trouble. By the way, a lot more than our caveman ancestors would have. And that's the weird thing. We got this brain that was developed to keep us alive and therefore focuses on the negative. Now, we live in a world where the physical dangers are minimized. So our negative thinking brain has nothing to do and looks for problems in the small things. And even though the living, like the standard of living is higher than it ever was, healthcare is better than it ever was. I know in the States it's different, but at least in Europe, you've got social security and healthcare and all that. And it's just still people are depressed at a level that our ancestors probably didn't know. And I think it is because we've built ourselves a world that is void of physical danger most of the time, but at the same time so stressful with other impulses that our brain hasn't learned to deal with either. Because back in the day, if you weren't around saber-toothed tigers, and if you did take care of food and shelter and fire, and not getting beaten to death by other cavemen, then life was good. And that's like the life of a dog. Dogs still, they get up in the morning, they're happy. And as long as there's food in their tummy and a shelter above their head, life is good. And we are the most evolved of species, they say. But we don't manage to be as happy as a dog with as little... by the way, as long as survival is not secure, it is our utmost priority. And if survival is at stake and we manage to survive, we can be really happy. Without the newest iPhone, without the coolest shoes, without the best fashion, without getting likes on Instagram. But as soon as survival is secured, we find other ways of stressing ourselves out.
Totally.
Just because we can.
Yeah, one of my mentors when I was in my early 20s, she would always say, just stay busy, do something, don't worry about it. And I'd be like, what does that mean? But I want to worry about it. She's like, no, that's boredom. That's nothing else. And it took me years to figure out what she meant, because now as an adult, I have mastered the art of just stay busy, go into action, stay busy. Because when you're busy, you're too busy to worry. Worry comes, I worry more when I don't have enough time, when I have too much time on my hands. When I'm just it's almost like that self-indulgent thinking pivots into fearful prospecting immediately when there's just simply nothing else to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's one coping strategy. And as long as, here's the thing, that's not wrong or right either, right? If that makes you happy and that works for you, bang, perfect, right? If someone else is through that mechanism goes into too much hustle and totally burns out because they work too much, because they want to keep themselves busy, because they can't stand being alone with their own brain, then perhaps they might want to learn to be alone with their own brain, and might want to learn to, I don't know, through meditation, through, actually learning to deal with your thoughts, find a way of also having quiet moments and being cool with those. But that's also a question of, is what you're doing a strategy that works for you? If it is, perfect. If it's not, look for something else.
Yeah.
If that works, cool. If it doesn't, look for something else.
I'm someone who like dangles in the extremes, right? So I went from that to total hustle burnout mode to then go into, vegging around in meditation land for way too long, that I kind of missed the boat on life there for a minute. I was so far off with the fairies, I missed the boat on life. And I think like now in my, 30s, in the last like 5-6 years, I've really...
Oh, you're not.
Who, me?
I met you. You're not.
Yeah, I know. People say that and I appreciate it. I'm like getting closer to 40 every day, and I like it. I like it that way too. But like now I just also feel really just like I got the balance worked out, like I'm comfortable in my solitude and aloneness, and understanding that I'm observing my thoughts, not identifying with them, and I launch into necessary action in response to what's going on.
And by the way, perhaps that is the one caveat that people can take out of this. I hope there are more, but I think that is one very important thing, that it is a journey. Yeah. Like you said before, it is the road, and coaching can cut years of your learning curve, can help you do the good learning instead of the bad learning. But at the end, you're going to find your very personal way of dealing with reality. And that might involve exactly such a journey of being totally type A hustle mode, then going totally with the fairies, and then because you've lived it, you go somewhere in the middle that feels good to you. But most things we can only really understand through experience. You can get information through a book. You can get inspiration from a book. You can get that one phrase that you're like, yeah, that I should do. And if you then fill it with life, that's cool. Yeah. But in the end, it's always a journey, and you're allowed to take that time for the journey. Totally. I think that's important for so many people.
And thank you for that. I do think that is, I think it's so true. And thank you for being here. We're actually way over our time, but we got so carried away in an extraordinary conversation, and that I don't mind when that happens at all. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to post links to your websites and where to find you below this podcast. So guys, if you're listening, go check him out. See if you can find him somewhere. And I do highly recommend working with him. It's such a pleasure having you on here, and, talk to you soon.
Silvia, it was a pleasure. And everybody, thanks for listening. Have a great day.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Silvia Christman, or look for the DNX podcast, and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.